I find myself reflecting on the choices I've made, and it's not easy to put into words the complex emotions that have been swirling within me. My name is Ellen, and I'm 25 years old. I got married at the age of 18 to a man 2 years older than me, my first love from high school. In the beginning, there was attraction and passion, but over time, it turned into a routine. My husband was caring and supportive, especially during my pregnancy and the birth of our daughter. However, as the years passed, I became restless. I didn't pursue further education or work, and though my husband was studying and working, money was tight as he was just starting his career. After 5 years together, I realized that my feelings for him had cooled. It wasn't until our daughter was born that I acknowledged I no longer loved him. I had let him love me while I daydreamed of a different life, a life of luxury and adventure with a wealthy prince. Enter Edward, a 33-year-old man I connected with online. He lived in Switzerland and had his own international tourist business. We exchanged messages secretly at first, and later we communicated via Skype. Throughout this time, I maintained the facade of a caring mother and loving wife, even though my relationship with my husband had become mundane. Edward planned to visit America, and we arranged to meet. The anticipation filled me with both joy and fear, joy for the prospect of a new life, and fear of the impending conversation with my husband, who loved me deeply. Edward arrived, and we spent time exploring the city before returning to a hotel room where everything changed between us for the first time. We did the deed, and it was magical. I found myself living in what felt like a fairy tale with Edward. We spent 2 days together in his room, during which I disconnected from the outside world, savoring every moment of what seemed like bliss. In those 2 days, my mind was solely focused on my newfound happiness. Edward, however, dropped a bombshell after the 2 days. He informed me that he had completed his business in America, was heading back home to Switzerland, and was ready to take both me and my daughter with him as his fiancée. The gravity of the situation hit me, and I eagerly agreed, knowing that a challenging conversation awaited me when I returned home. Facing my husband was one of the most difficult moments. He confronted me, desperate and worried, having called hospitals and morgues fearing the worst. I callously revealed that I had met someone else, fallen in love, and intended to leave him, taking our daughter with me. Despite his pleas and attempts to convince me otherwise, I stood firm, dismissing him as pathetic. I tried to rationalize my decision, promising him visitation rights and suggesting ways to stay connected to Skype. But my husband was resolute. Frustrated, I resorted to insults and accusations, blaming him for hindering our daughter's bright future with his perceived jealousy and resentment. Returning to Edward, I poured out the details, hoping for comfort. He suggested leaving our daughter behind for now, exploring and living with him for a month, and then returning to finalize the divorce. He assured me that, if necessary, we could find a way to bring our daughter with us, even if it meant resorting to questionable means. In the midst of my emotional turmoil, a pang of conscience struck me for the first time. My husband wasn't entirely at fault, and I began to feel conflicted. As I went home to gather my documents, I tried once more to persuade my husband, admitting my unfair treatment and seeking forgiveness. However, he remained steadfast in his refusal. As I prepared to leave, Edward informed me of an unexpected detour to his hotel in Mexico to settle some formalities before our journey to Switzerland. My heart trembles as I revisit the nightmare that unfolded after arriving at the hotel in Mexico. What began as a thrilling adventure turned into a horror movie beyond my worst fears. The staff welcomed us to the room with champagne and a light breakfast, but after indulging in the drink, the world around me blurred and consciousness slipped away. When I awoke, the setting had drastically changed. I found myself in a windowless room, naked and devoid of any belongings. Panic set in as 3 men entered, their Latino appearance only intensifying my terror. They congratulated me on my arrival, claiming ownership of me. I screamed for Edward, desperately protesting, but they insisted they knew nothing of him. The reality hit hard. They were the orchestrators of my torment. Days passed in that grim cell with relentless beatings, assaults, and injections of unknown substances. It was surreal, feeling like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Eventually, they dragged me to a shower, forcing me to clean up before tossing clothes my way. A man in his mid-40s awaited in an office, informing me that my life now rested in his hands. The truth unfolded. He exposed Edward as a courier involved in trafficking, preying on naive girls like me. Refusing to comply resulted in more brutality. They threatened my daughter, showing me pictures to reinforce their control. I was coerced into writing messages to my husband, severing ties and claiming a newfound happiness. His replies, asking me not to call again, further deepened the isolation. For a year, I endured the unimaginable soul-like property subjected to abuse, humiliation, and violence. The clientele consisted of wealthy, perverse individuals. The constant fear for my life and the lives of my loved ones kept me compliant. Yet, in the midst of this hell, a sudden eruption of gunfire disrupted the brothel. Chaos ensued, providing a fleeting window of opportunity for escape. The return to the USA after escaping that horrifying ordeal should have marked the end of my nightmare. Instead, it opened a new chapter of challenges that I never saw coming. My husband's response was like a punch to the gut, cold, unyielding, and devoid of the warmth I once knew. The cafe meeting with him was surreal. 3 hours where I poured out my heart, hoping for a hint of sympathy or understanding. But in his eyes, there was only coldness and contempt. He informed me that neither he nor our daughter wanted anything to do with me. Legal custody was in his hands, and he showed no intention of letting go. The shock deepened when he pulled out a recorder, revealing he had recorded our entire conversation. My vulnerable moments, my plea for forgiveness, and my longing to see our daughter again all captured, and now a tool he could use against me. His demeanor had transformed into something I never imagined, a cruel, cold figure, hiding nothing of his contempt and hatred for the person I had become. He urged me not to appear in their lives again, threatening to expose my past to relatives, friends, and even our daughter. He painted a picture of me as a loving wife and caring mother who had tragically passed away, sparing our daughter the painful truth of my betrayal. Now I find myself grappling with a profound loneliness. I yearn for my daughter, miss her terribly, and even in the midst of my own mistakes, I can't help but reminisce about the good moments with my family. I don't harbor any illusions of forgiveness or reconciliation from my husband, but the isolation is a heavy burden. The question of what to do now looms large. It's a story marked by pain, regret, and a desperate desire for connection. As I navigate this tumultuous chapter, I wonder if there's a way to find a glimmer of hope, a path toward healing, or at the very least a chance to see my daughter again. If you've been through anything similar, I'd appreciate hearing your thoughts and advice in the comments.